Hello everyone, I'm Miranda and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I wanted to share some very special books from my book collection with you all. One of my greatest joys is to collect books that are centered around a particular author or a particular subject. And over the years I've amassed a fairly substantial number of books on Virginia Woolf and the Bloomsbury Group. So I wanted to share some of those with you today. I have a lot of books on the Bloomsbury Group, so I think this will have to be a part one, but I'll share all of them hopefully with you over the course of a couple of videos or so. My real interest in Virginia Woolf and the Bloomsbury Group started when I was a university student in Bloomsbury in London, and I started to read more Virginia Woolf and more about the Bloomsbury Group. And I took to street haunting, as Virginia Woolf called it, walking around all of the streets of Bloomsbury. And I would think of her and the Bloomsbury Group when I walked around Gordon Square and Tavistock Square and places like that. So my real fascination started then. I've always been especially fond of Virginia Woolf's non-fiction writing, but she's just such an influential as well as a fascinating character within female literary history. She's someone I love to learn more about, read more about, as well as the extended Bloomsbury Group. And a very important member of that was Virginia's sister, Vanessa Bell. And I so admire her artwork. I'm a huge Vanessa Bell fan, and so I've also collected some books about her and her art, but let me share them with you. So first up, a Persephone book, which is a collection of extracts from Virginia Woolf's diary. It's called A Writer's Diary, being extracts from the diary of Virginia Woolf, and this was compiled by her husband Leonard Woolf. This is a really great introduction to Virginia Woolf's diaries. I've got a complete set of them as well, but this is one that I turn to again and again because I think the extracts chosen are just really brilliant. They give such a delightful insight into her mind, into her writing process, and it's a sort of book that's lovely to pick up through the year and read a bit of what Virginia Woolf's thoughts and preoccupations were in October, for instance. She really was a very gifted diarist, and to a certain extent too, I think she wrote her diary thinking that parts of it would be published in the future. So it's quite interesting in some ways to read the diary with the knowledge that these were some of the thoughts she perhaps wanted to share as well to a wider audience. So I think that that's really interesting, and I just love the insights into her mind as well as some of the day-to-day details that you get from reading this. And then, like I said, I really love Virginia Woolf's non-fiction writing, and I have her common reader collections. Now, these are a selection of essays that she wrote on the art of writing and about writers themselves. And she's just such an exceptional writer, and I really love reading her thoughts on contemporary writers as well as writers from the past, and she just does such a brilliant job at bringing some of these writers to life, at examining their life as well as their works with that incredible intelligence that she has. So these essays are still so relevant to read today, and I really enjoy dipping into this on a regular basis too. And then this book called Genius in Ink, Virginia Woolf on How to Read, is a more sort of updated version of some of the common reader essays that were collected, and I really actually like this edition a lot. It's got a foreword by Annie Smith, and it's just got some lovely essays in here. She's written on the letters of Henry James, for instance. She's written about rereading novels, and other writers like Joseph Conrad. So there's really a lot that's really interesting in here if you're an avid reader as well as being a Virginia Woolf fan, and I recommend this new little collection. And then this is another wonderful book. It's called Travels with Virginia Woolf, and it's edited by Jan Morris, and it's a collection again from her letters and from her diaries about places that she travelled to in her life, and they're all collected geographically. So there's a section on Sussex, on Cornwall, which was very important to Virginia Woolf, on London, on Germany, France, Italy, Spain, so all around the UK as well as abroad. And this is so interesting. You get such great insights into the sort of social details of travel at that time, what it was like, as well as Virginia Woolf's thoughts on the places that she travelled to. So if you like a bit of armchair travelling, then this is a really interesting book to get and a really good read. Then I love this book called Square Haunting by Francesca Wade. And this is a book about 5 women who lived in Mecklenburgh Square in Bloomsbury in London in the interwar years. And Virginia Woolf was one of these women. So not only does this book give you a wider idea of what Bloomsbury was like in those years, why it attracted so many women in particular, and women who really pushed the bounds of convention at that time, and also had big ambitions in terms of being writers or artists in some way. So this book explains why Bloomsbury attracted that type of character, and it also goes into some detail on Virginia Woolf's years towards the end of her life that she spent in Mecklenburgh Square and then the outbreak of war. So it's a really fascinating read, definitely worth getting if you're interested in the Bloomsbury Group in London at that time and in Virginia Woolf in particular. Then I really love this book called Vanessa and Her Sister by Priya Parmar. This is actually a novel, but I think it's so well done. It's a fictionalized account of Virginia Woolf's early years when she was still Virginia Stevens, and also of her sister, Vanessa, and Vanessa's marriage to Clive Bell. And what's unusual about this book is that it really takes a very good look at Vanessa, and a lot of the story is told through her perspective, which I really enjoyed because there's so much attention always given to Vanessa's very famous sister, and there hasn't been as much written about Vanessa herself. So I really enjoyed reading a novel that was from Vanessa's perspective. And you could tell that Priya Parmar put a huge amount of research into this. It really is brilliantly researched, and there are some letters between the two sisters that are fictionalized. Priya Parmar wrote them, but I thought she caught the tone of their communication really well. And it was just fascinating to look at this very close bond, because Vanessa and Virginia were really close as sisters, but to look at that bond through Vanessa's eyes, I really enjoyed. And although Priya Parmar isn't an artist herself, I thought she also wrote very convincingly about the appeal of art and the life of an artist, and Vanessa's fascination with art and her ambition to become an artist herself. It also covers a lot on the early years of the Bloomsbury Group and setting that up, as well as looking at Vanessa in terms of her motherhood. She was really a very natural, I think, and brilliant mother, and this book covers that too. So a really enjoyable read. I really recommend this one. And then this is another big favourite of mine. It's the Bloomsbury Cookbook, Recipes for Life, Love and Art by Jans Ondatier Rolls. Sorry, I probably pronounced that name wrong, but this is such a gorgeous book. It's stuffed full of beautiful images, artwork, photographs, little almost like menus drawn up. I think that Cressida Bell provided some of the illustrations for this, and she's the granddaughter of Vanessa Bell. I love Cressida Bell's designs. I've interviewed her in the past, and in fact I'm wearing a Cressida Bell scarf in honour of the Bloomsbury Group today. So this is just a feast for the senses in many ways. It's a real feast for the eyes, that's for sure, and the recipes sound delicious too. I admit I haven't actually made that many from here. This is more a book that I've loved to just read, because more really than a recipe book, it is a book about the Bloomsbury Group, and I think it's a really clever idea to look at this very intellectual, very creative group of people through the eyes of what they ate and how they gathered together around a table, not only to share a meal, but also to share ideas that were so forward-thinking and revolutionary for that time. And I find it absolutely fascinating, and it's just such a beautiful book too. I love to just flick through it, dip in and out, but there's also recipes that I think have never been published before from the sort of Charleston household, and Charleston was a real hub of the Bloomsbury Group. It was where Vanessa Bell moved to a little later in life, and she lived there with the artist Duncan Grant. And it's just a really wonderful homage to the Bloomsbury Group, and I love it. It's glorious. And then this is another really fascinating book called Rooms of Their Own, and it looks at the houses of Eddie Sackville-West, Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville-West. Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville-West had a very important relationship. They had an affair with each other, but also they had a real friendship. And it's really fascinating to look at the homes. The title of the book, of course, is taken from Virginia Woolf's famous essay, A Room of One's Own, which is about women's place in literature and the struggle for women, especially at that time, to break into a sphere that was so male dominated. A lot of what she wrote in that essay still rings true today. It's one of my favourite pieces by her, and she writes of the importance of women to have a room of their own, or essentially money and time, and that needed independence to be able to devote some time to writing. I'm always so interested in the houses of writers, and so I love this book that does show you some of the places in which Virginia Woolf lived, like Monk's House, which I have visited and is such a very special place. Seeing Virginia Woolf's bedroom is amazing. I'll never forget the first time that I entered the little doorway to her bedroom that opens right onto the garden, and it's just so special. There's really incredible atmosphere at Monk's House. And I've also been to Sissinghurst, which is one of the homes in which Vita Sackville-West lived. She was such a keen gardener, and she created a beautiful garden at Sissinghurst that is especially famous for its roses. And I've been there during rose season as well as in the autumn, and it's just glorious. It's such a beautiful place. So I was really interested to read a bit more about the homes of these people in this book, and it's beautifully illustrated with lots of gorgeous photographs as well. So this is quite a special one. And then Virginia Woolf at Home by Hilary Macaskill takes a look specifically at the homes in which Virginia Woolf lived and how those homes influenced her work and her life. And it's a really fascinating book. I really enjoyed it. It starts out from Virginia Woolf's first home at Hyde Park Gate, and then the move to Bloomsbury after the death of her parents, the setting up of the Bloomsbury Group. It covers Virginia's years in Richmond and her marriage to Leonard Woolf, and how they set up the Hogarth Press together. And then of course it also features beautiful Monk's House, which is lovely. So this is a really good read too, and again it just has some really beautiful photographs as well in it, which is very special. It brings everywhere alive, which is wonderful. And then this is a book that I picked up in a second-hand shop and I was so pleased to stumble across. It's called Virginia Woolf and the Raverats, A Different Sort of Friendship, edited by William Pryor. And this is a collection of essays between Virginia Woolf and Gwen Raverat and her husband Jacques Raverat. Gwen Raverat was a wood engraver who I really admire. I love her wood engravings, and she wrote a brilliant memoir too called Period Piece. But she was an early member of the Bloomsbury Group. She got to know Virginia Woolf, and very sadly her husband had MS, and he in fact died when he was only 40 years old, and a lot of their life together was overshadowed by that, and they knew, I think, that he didn't have that long to live. And so the letters between Virginia Woolf and the Raverats are very moving in that way. But this again is a book that I love to dip in and out of, and I love some of the reproductions of the letters that are shown. And then there's some beautiful artwork as well, both by Jacques Raverat and Gwen Raverat, that's shown in the book. And it's just a really interesting collection of letters, and I think this is a friendship that hasn't been explored as much in the sort of canon of literature around Virginia Woolf. So yeah, I was really pleased to find this, and being such a fan of Gwen Raverat, this was really interesting to me. This is a book, again, that I've been dipping in and out of. It's called Voyaging Out, British Women Artists from Suffrage to the 60s by Carolyn Trant. And this is really fascinating. Of course, the title of the book is taken from Virginia Woolf's first novel called The Voyage Out. And it says, Virginia Woolf's first novel, The Voyage Out, has her female heroine strive towards a realization of her sense of self, asking what being a woman might mean. In the decades after women won the vote in Britain, the fortunes of women artists were shaped by war, domesticity, continued oppressions, and spirited resistance. Some succeeded in forging creative careers, others were thwarted by the odds stacked against them. Weaving devastating individual stories with playful critique, Voyaging Out reveals this hidden history. There's a lot in this about Vanessa Bell and the Bloomsbury Group, which I really enjoy, and also about some of my other favourite female artists like Laura Knight and Barbara Hepworth. So I've just sort of read some of those bits from it so far, but I'd really like to read it cover to cover. It's such an engrossing book and a really fascinating subject, and I am so interested in female artists from that time as well, so that book I really recommend if you are too. Then of course I had to get this book when I went to Charleston for the first time, which was quite a few years ago now, and I'll never forget the experience. Charleston was the home of Vanessa Bell, and she lived there with the artist Duncan Grant, and it was a real hub for the Bloomsbury Group. And Charleston has just the most amazing atmosphere. Visiting it is just like walking back in time. You feel like Vanessa Bell has only just walked out of the room. It's just incredible, and if you've never been, I so recommend going. I think it's so special to be able to visit the homes of artists and writers, and there's nowhere quite like Charleston. It's just a really fascinating house, and it's decorated with so much of Vanessa Bell and Duncan Bell's artwork. It's a place that has inspired so many writers and artists, and yes, I just say go. If you've never been, then do go. And if you can't go yet, then get the book. Because one thing about Charleston is that you can't take pictures when you go around the house. And so it's really lovely to buy the book so that you can remember your trip there, and you'll want to remember the details of the rooms because they're just so special. So it's wonderful to buy the book, not only because it will give you a bit of a history of the house and the Bloomsbury Group, but also because it will help you to remember some of the beautiful interiors. So I really recommend getting this one. This is another lovely volume. It's the illustrated letters of Virginia Woolf, selected and introduced by Frances Spalding. And again, it follows the course of her life through the places in which she lived and the letters that she wrote at these different times of her life. It's really beautifully done. Again, it's full of gorgeous photographs and illustrations, artworks. And I think the selection of letters have been very well chosen as well. So I really love this series of books. There have been a few done on this series, one of them on the Pre-Raphaelites and one on Jane Austen. And I think they're just gorgeous. But this one of Virginia Woolf is definitely a must-have if you love the Bloomsbury Group and her writing. I think it's really stunning. This book I bought on one of my trips to Cornwall, and it's called Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell, A Childhood in St Ives. As I've said, Cornwall was really important to Virginia Woolf. She, as a child, went there with her parents and siblings, and they had very special summers spent in St Ives at Talland House. And when I went to St Ives, my mum and I persuaded the taxi driver to drive us to Talland House, which I think is broken up into private flats now. But we were able to just stand outside and take a look at it. And that was really special. Virginia Woolf was very inspired by Cornwall. She had so many happy memories of her childhood there and of looking out, and she could see a lighthouse from Talland House. And that was a lighthouse that inspired her famous novel To the Lighthouse, even though that is set in Scotland. The lighthouse that inspired it was in Cornwall. And this is a lovely book really about Cornwall's influence on both Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell, and about their early childhood. And it's a really interesting book. Again, it's beautifully illustrated, lots of photographs, which are wonderful to see. And if you are a fan of Cornwall or the Bloomsbury Group, then I'd say that this is a lovely addition to your shelves as well. Then while I was in St Ives, I went to the Tate St Ives, and they had this wonderful exhibition on Virginia Woolf, and it was about artwork inspired by her writing, and it was really thoughtfully curated. And the whole experience of seeing that exhibition at the Tate St Ives, which is stunning, it's got so many huge windows, so you just look out to the sea, and seeing this exhibition in that setting was incredibly inspiring. I loved it, and it was a really special trip. And I bought the catalogue to remember the paintings, and it's also full of really interesting essays and thoughts on Virginia Woolf's work, and I really recommend it. It's probably quite hard to find now, but if you ever do come across a copy, it's published by Tate, then I would really recommend it, because yeah, it's just really interesting. Then next up I've already said how much I love Vanessa Bell's artwork, and I'm so happy that in more recent years I think she's had a lot more recognition, which she so deserves. And a few years ago there was a big exhibition of her work at Dulwich Picture Gallery in London, and I was so excited to go to it. And again, I bought the catalogue from that exhibition. And I'm so glad I did, because this is full of beautiful examples of Vanessa Bell's artwork. She did a lot of the early dust jackets of Virginia Woolf's books for the Hogarth Press. And they're so stunning. It was really special to see some of those and to see so much of her artwork that I had just never seen before. And this is still a book that I love to put out on the coffee table often, so I can remember to flick through it a lot, because it's just so beautiful. So this one is really special to me as well. Then I've spoken about my love for Virginia Woolf's home, Monk's House, which is very near to Charleston. But equally delightful is the garden at Monk's House. It's absolutely stunning. There's a beautiful orchard. You can see the little it's grander than a shed, but almost like this little writing shed that she had set up in the garden. And it's such a special place to visit, and I absolutely love the garden. And this book is called Virginia Woolf's Garden, The Story of the Garden at Monk's House by Carolyn Zoob. And Carolyn Zoob actually lived at Monk's House for a while, and she got to know the garden really well. And again, there are stunning photographs in this book, and she writes a lot about Leonard Woolf and his plans for the garden, as well as how it inspired Virginia too. And it's just really delightful. If you're a keen gardener, then I think you would really enjoy this book. But it's really fascinating. There's some lovely quotes and things all through it too, so it's a lovely read. And then this book is a favourite of mine. It's Bloomsbury Needlepoint by Melinda Cos. And this is actually really gorgeous. I have yet to try any of the embroidery projects in it, but it's so stunning just to look at. I think both Duncan Grant and Vanessa Bell did quite a bit of embroidery, and you can see examples of it at Charleston. And this book really focuses on their embroidery, and it also gives some patterns inspired by the Bloomsbury Group and Charleston style, which is lovely, so you can do things yourself. I haven't tried any of these, but I just love looking at them, and I love that sort of really distinctive look of Duncan Grant's and Vanessa Bell's, and I think that these look like really beautiful projects. And I love needlework, I love embroidery, so I like just reading about it too, and this one is so interesting, and it shares some of their original designs, I think, too, which is really interesting. So if you're into needlework, then this one would be a lovely book to get. And then finally for today, I was so thrilled to get this book, I think a year or two ago now. There was an exhibition again on in London at a sort of small private gallery that I went to, and they sold this book as part of the exhibition. And it's called From Omega to Charleston, The Art of Vanessa Bell and Duncan Grant from 1910 to 1934. And in this exhibition, they showed these fabulous plates that were made by Vanessa Bell and Duncan Grant. Each plate shows a famous woman from history. Charleston, I think, has since managed to acquire the plates, so I think that they're available to see at Charleston now, which is wonderful, but it was really special to see them at this intimate little gallery in London. Love this plate that's Vanessa Bell. And yes, this is the book that shows all of the plates really clearly. Jane Austen, of course, I love that one. And it also shows some of their artwork as well, which I really enjoy. It's a gorgeous book, and the paintings are reproduced on big pages, which I really love too, because I get to really look at them closely, which I love. So yes, this is a stunning book as well. You can see more of the plates on the back. So this is a very special book on my shelves. But anyway, those are a lot of the books from my Virginia Woolf and the Bloomsbury Group collection. I hope you enjoyed learning about some of these titles. Let me know if you're a fan of the Bloomsbury Group. Do you collect any books about them? Do you have any of these? Or do you have any that you think I would love that you can recommend to me? Like I said, I do have a few more books about this theme that I'll be sharing at some point, I'm sure, in the future. But do give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, which you can do by clicking my face that pops up down here. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Bye!